Welcome back to Dean Obeidallah Show. We're live here Friday, January 5th. Right now, for the first time in 2024, our friend Glenn Kirschner, former 30-year federal prosecutor, served in the U.S. Army, JAG Corps. You see him all the time on MSNBC. He's a legal analyst. His YouTube channel should not be missed. It's called Justice Matters with Glenn Kirschner. Glenn, Happy New Year. Thanks for being here.
Happy New Year, Dean. Great to be with you.
So your buddy Harry Dunn, Capitol Police Officer, is running for Congress. This is exciting. We're going to try to get him on the show.
We need more American heroes in Congress. Somebody who, is willing to stand up, not just somebody who knows right from wrong, but somebody who's willing to stand up against the wrong. The people who are, announcing that they're going to be dictators on day one. I mean, Harry has always put his money where his mouth is as a Capitol Police officer for the past 15 years. But these are the kind of people we need representing us in Congress to try to make some damn headway.
I agree. I wish we'd get Michael Fanone and Sergeant Ganell and those to run against all the January 6th deniers in Congress, all those Republicans running against Marjorie Taylor Greene and the bunch of them there and go like, yeah, they're saying it didn't happen. Inside job. I'm here to tell you the truth about it. So tomorrow is this third anniversary of January 6th. More than 1,200 people have been arrested. About almost 500 were incarcerated or still in prison over 20 years. Yet Donald Trump, the man who gave us this entire thing, who the people waged their battle for him, committed crimes for him, walks free to this day. What's your reaction?
He should. Look, I try not to be angry and frustrated all the time, but Donald Trump should have been locked up on January 7th or at the latest, Dean, after he left office on January 20th. It's so disheartening when, let me just take one example of one batch of crimes Donald Trump committed. The Mueller report, volume 2, lays out as many as 10 felony obstruction of justice crimes. Dean, all we had to do on January 20th, I'm not making this up, this is not hyperbole, is put what's called a face sheet on top of volume 2 of the Trump Russia report, walk into a judge's chambers in Washington, D.C., ask for an arrest warrant based on the evidence that was documented in volume 2. 10 federal judges out of 10 would have issued an arrest warrant for Donald Trump. But we have been wearing our kid gloves when it comes to Donald Trump ever since. That is inexcusable. I understand he's indicted 4 times over, up and down the eastern seaboard, in state courts and federal court, and he's going to be criminally convicted. 2023 was the year of the Trump indictments. 2024 will be the year of the Trump convictions. I'm not going to say it's too little, too late, but boy, the American people deserve to have had Donald Trump held accountable for his attack on our democracy on January 7th.
What's your reaction to Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis both saying that if Donald Trump is convicted of crimes, that if they're president, they will pardon him so he's not held accountable for his attempted coup or his role on January 6th?
Yeah, there are no weaker politicians than Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley. They can't stand up to an abject criminal, never mind standing up to world leaders who will test the mettle of any president. They have all but disqualified them. They've disqualified themselves from holding high government office. And it's all kind of an academic discussion anyway, because it looks like Donald Trump is likely to run away with the nomination, even if he is running for the presidency from the Federal Bureau of Prisons.
And I'm talking with our friend Glenn Kirschner. Glenn, a lot of press has been spilled this week, a lot of ink on the fact a new Washington Post poll finds 44% of Trump supporters think the FBI instigated the January 6th attack. I frankly don't care what MAGA supporters care. They can live whatever dream world they want. But I'm concerned more long term that if people could be this easily manipulated, history warns us you could get to something even darker than January 6th. What is your reaction to this? What are your concerns?
My concerns are, endless. But the reality is, as prosecutors, we have to do business. We have to make prosecutorial decisions completely divorced from how they might be received by anybody. So, You need to keep sawing the criminal justice wood. You need to take Donald Trump to trial, get him convicted. I mean, I think the statistics that you cite, Dean, are the best argument for cameras in the courtroom, because the only thing that has any hope of penetrating MAGA world is actually being able to see with their own eyes the evidence that will lead to the conviction of Donald Trump. It may not persuade a whole lot of them, but here's the thing. We often hear the MAGA folks referred to as a cult, and I think there's a lot to be said for that. They seem completely divorced from reality. They're either unable or unwilling to engage in fact-based assessments of what's going on around them. But here's the thing, Dean. When we see people who have fallen prey to a cult, who have put themselves in harm's way, what do we generally try to do? We try to help. We try to extract them. We try to open their eyes with actual facts and information. I think we have a responsibility to keep trying to do that, as hard as it can be when, they're up in your face calling you names and cussing like they are on Twitter and everywhere else. But I will never stop trying to kind of penetrate that bubble and help folks who are either unwilling or unable to help themselves, recognizing that we can't save them all. We can't extract them all from the cult. I think we need to keep trying.
Yes, we could try. I don't know. To me, I'm not trying to change them. They can live their life. It's a question of the bigger picture. Where are we going as a nation? And we don't know for sure. But let me ask you, you mentioned cult, but also others have analogized Trump to organized crime. You've worked in prosecuting organized crime, or in your office that you were a prosecutor. In cases where a leader of an organized crime organization was put away, did that have a big impact on the actual organization itself, or did they just simply someone move up and replace that person?
Yeah, it tends to fracture the organization, perhaps if only because underlings, underbosses, capos begin to fight for control of the organization. But it does tend to break it apart, and eventually the organizations dissolve. I think the feds have had a good bit of success going after organized crime using the RICO laws over the years. And yeah, Donald Trump is a mob boss. No two ways about it, right? Punishes his perceived enemies. He rewards those who are good foot soldiers, like he's doing to the J6 defendants, the insurrectionists who attacked and beat the living hell out of our brave police officers. He calls them hostages, and he calls them patriots. And, I heard our friend Sergeant Gunnell say, I think this morning on Morning Joe, so what does that make the police who were defending the Capitol that day? Are we hostage takers if they're hostages? I mean, that's a point well made. So he is a mob boss. He operates like a mob boss. And I think my greatest disappointment, Dean, is that the Republican Party seems unwilling or unable to stand up to that. They could have galvanized against him long ago, retained some respectability, and fought for our democracy, gotten rid of him, and we could have been back to arguing ideology between Republicans and Democrats instead of arguing about whether we should have a democracy or a dictatorship in the future.
How concerned are you that Donald Trump understands the reality that the only way he stays out of prison is by winning this election? And that if he doesn't win this election, that he is going to jail, and he's going to spend likely the last days of his life in a prison cell?
Oh, I think he knows it. I think he knows it to his core. And one thing I was really interested to see, it was a recent post of his where he seems to have changed tactics a little bit. What he said in all caps, and we know why he puts certain things in all caps, because he's sending a signal to his supporters. Look, folks, these are the important words because I capitalized them all against all rules of grammar. But putting that aside, he said, listen, the crazy, mad dog Democrats like Liz Cheney have destroyed all of the evidence that would have proved I'm innocent. Therefore, and I'm paraphrasing, but pretty close, my attorneys will not be able to adequately defend me in court. What is he doing? He's softening the ground for his supporters to reject the coming criminal convictions. That was a little bit of a change of tactics for him. It seems he's given up the ghost on being found not guilty or avoiding being prosecuted. And he's now sending the signal to his supporters, I will be convicted, but you're going to need to reject those convictions because the Democrats destroyed the evidence that would have shown I'm not guilty.
And they will, of course, accept that his base unquestioningly and repeat that all over, especially when they call my show and other shows and go, that's exactly what you hear all the time. And I'm talking with a friend, Glenn Kirschner. Glenn, I saw you made a video about the Maine Secretary of State after she disqualified Donald Trump, saying he engaged in insurrection, thus is unable to hold any office. She was met with a tsunami of death threats directed against her. And you said there's a way to stop this. What is the way to stop this?
Applying the law as it was intended to be applied and as it is applied thousands of times every day in jurisdictions across America. You detain a defendant pending trial if he is a danger to the community or any person in the community. If the prosecutor can prove to the judge's satisfaction by clear and convincing evidence, that's the legal standard of proof when it comes to pretrial detention, that you are a flight risk or a danger to the community, you are to be detained pending trial. Dean, it's mind-boggling to me that we can allow this pattern to go on endlessly, where Donald Trump has a new perceived enemy. He starts posting all kinds of stuff about them, including their bios and their family members' names, outing their wives. And then his supporters attack. They level death threats. They SWAT. In other words, they call in false police emergencies at the person's home to summon a police presence to the house, like they did the Secretary of State Bellows up in Maine. Dean, he has done this over and over and over again to government officials, to prosecutors, to witnesses, and yet we continue to allow it to happen. If you detain him pending trial, you take away his megaphone, you begin to protect the people he and his supporters are attacking. It's the first step in taking out that mob boss and cleaning up the mob that has been running, roughshod over our democracy. If somebody could explain to me why no prosecutor or judge has been unwilling to do it, I'm all ears.
There is no answer. He's just getting treated unlike any other defendant we've ever seen in our country's history, at least the modern era. And it really chips away at people's confidence in the system. And I don't know if the judges understand that and who are not putting him in and deferring, oh, he's a candidate. It's not good for the system. Treat him the same way. And you can cite other examples where, well, there was a mob boss who was telegraphing messages to his supporters, and we put that person in because we knew they were trying to get violence against witnesses, potential jurors alike. And nope, it doesn't happen.
And Dean, part of the problem is the judges do understand it. I was in the appellate court in D.C. listening to the last oral argument. I think it might have been on the gag order. And Donald Trump's lawyers were arguing, wait a minute, because they were talking about the danger Donald Trump poses. And Donald Trump's lawyer said, oh, wait. Those are his supporters. He doesn't control them. He just posts what he posts. He doesn't tell them to attack anybody. And it was Judge Millett who said, wait a minute. That's nonsense because there's a pattern here. Donald Trump posts something about the witness and threats ensue. So the thing is, the judges do get it, but they have been unwilling to act because they're afraid it's going to be perceived as political. It's not. It is simply enforcing the law as it was intended to be applied and as it is applied to people every day.
And you mentioned the U.S. Court of Appeals. This Tuesday, there's going to be oral argument in Trump in the January 6th case, and I've covered on the show earlier in the week, where Trump filed a motion for immunity for everything. Any crimes he did in the White House, as long as he sent an email about it or said it had wink, something to do with the government, I can commit any crimes I want. And what I found remarkable is Jack Smith's opposition brief cites examples of what a president could do if Trump's argument was accepted. And they were very Trumpian examples, like having the National Guard kill your political critics, and they were trying to warn the court or plant evidence or sell nuclear secrets. This is about Trump. And so what do you expect? Are you going to go Tuesday to the hearing? And if you're not, what do you expect to hear from the Court of Appeals on this?
Yeah, I will be at the hearing Tuesday. I expect a very quick, unanimous ruling from the appeals court that presidents are not kings. Presidents can be prosecuted for their crimes. Presidents cannot kill their political opponents with impunity, which is exactly the position Donald Trump is advocating. And I love that Jack Smith didn't pull any punches, right down to responding to the suggestion that, well, but there's still impeachment. He could still be held accountable. He could be impeached and convicted in the Senate. And Jack Smith said, no, because if you make him a king and you put him beyond the reach of our nation's criminal laws, he could execute everybody in the House and the Senate that might vote against him on impeachment or in the Senate trial. That is not hyperbolic. That is exactly what Donald Trump is advocating for. So here is the big ticket question, Dean. Once the Federal Circuit Court in D.C. rejects his nonsense about absolute immunity, a president is king, does the Supreme Court accept that issue for review, or do they decline to accept it for review, sending it right back to Judge Chutkan so we can get our trial moving in the right direction? If they're honest brokers of the law, the Supreme Court, and the word "if" is doing heavy lifting in that sentence, I get it. If they're honest brokers of the law, they will say there's no federal statute, there is no appellate court opinion, there's no precedent, and there's no constitutional provision that says a president is a king, is above the law, is beyond the reach of our nation's criminal statutes. Therefore, we have no reason to accept this case for review. Will they be able to do their job, discharge their duties? I don't know. They may feel compelled to stick their fingers in the presidential pie at every opportunity, but they should not accept the case for review because there is absolutely no issue, constitutional or otherwise, that needs to be resolved by the Supreme Court.
You know, the biggest question we all have, because we all agree this is going to get rejected, is timing. So there's still that March 5th trial date on the books.
Yeah.
It seems likely that would have to be moved because Judge Chutkan did stay the underlying proceedings for most part. They're stayed. But, I mean, is the quickest scenario, say you have the oral argument Tuesday, the three judges say they render a decision by Friday. You know what? And I know that Trump's lawyers can try to get an en banc hearing, which is all the Court of Appeals judges, but on it from the DC Circuit. In timing, from your experience, any sense of, say the opinion comes out Friday, say, because it's a pretty clean case, they come out Friday, they go, you don't have immunity, that's it. Is there a scenario that it goes back to Chutkan and they go, we're on, let's keep moving forward, or it stays and they appeal higher?
Well, you know, there are time frames that will allow Trump to petition for en banc review. That is all of the judges of the appellate court. And I don't believe they're going to ignore those time frames and say, we're not going to give you that time because, you know, time is of the essence. We're burning democracy daylight here. I still think there's a chance. I think the odds are decreasing day by day and week by week, but I still think there's a chance the March 4 trial date, which is only jury selection, will hold. Okay. But if it doesn't, Dean, if it slips a couple of weeks, even if it slips a month or two, I still think Donald Trump will be tried, will be convicted, and will be sentenced in advance of the November 2024 presidential election. But here's the good news. If the DC trial gets continued altogether because this thing gets bogged down in the Supreme Court, the good news is Donald Trump has a backup auxiliary criminal trial facing him in New York. Not many defendants have so many criminal prosecutions on their dance card that if one drops out, there's another one ready to go. March 25th, that's a state case, has nothing to do with, I think, the issues being litigated right now. So Alvin Bragg can get his trial on March 25th. But if that one slips, he's got another backup auxiliary trial set for May 20th down in Florida. And if that one slips, we're still waiting for a trial date in Georgia. Listen, I do not think the law enforcement authorities of this country, state and federal, are going to let him slouch toward the presidential elections unprosecuted. We're going to get him to trial somewhere, somehow, in some jurisdiction.
And the other thing pending for Donald Trump, and the U.S. Supreme Court does not have to take it, but people believe they will, is the Section 3 14th Amendment case. You've got Maine disqualification, the Colorado Supreme Court rendering a decision. Yeah. Trump's legal team has now formally appealed the Colorado case. Objectively speaking, can you see a scenario where 5 justices at least say, you know what? This applies. This was an insurrection. You engaged in it, and we're applying this to you, and you're disqualified from holding any office in the land.
You know, Dean, this is such an intensely interesting question, especially for constitutional law nerds like me. And we could do an hour law school class on it. It's just that interesting. It's also very dense and complicated. But here's the thing. The states are the ones who are entitled by our Constitution to run elections, including elections for federal office. That's why we have 50 different state laws and state procedures with respect to how each state goes about qualifying or disqualifying people from their state ballots. The Supreme Court has no, and what did the Supreme Court just do when it revoked women's constitutional privacy rights to make their own health decisions? They said, no, 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 no. All 50 states get to make up whatever laws they want. Some of them are trying to kill women, like in Texas. They get to make up any laws they want, and we, the Supreme Court, have no business stepping in and announcing one uniform standard. The same holds true for elections. Each of the 50 states get to run their own elections, including for federal office. And what have we seen? We've seen Michigan say our state law doesn't allow us to disqualify him from the president Republican primary ballot. Right. So he's on. What do we have in California? Our state laws don't allow us to disqualify him, so he's going to be on the ballot. Colorado followed its state law. They ran it through the courts, and their state law provides that they can disqualify him from the ballot. Maine, the Secretary of State is empowered, as opposed to the courts in Colorado. The Secretary of State has the duty, a sworn duty under the laws of Maine, to decide after a hearing whether he's qualified or disqualified. She disqualified him. Now, under Maine law, that's moved to the state courts. All of the states are doing what the states are not only supposed to do, Dean, but what they're entitled to do under the separation of federal powers and states' rights. So the Supreme Court has a damn decision to make. Are we going to act the way the Supreme Court is supposed to act? Are we going to limit ourselves in the powers that we have to tell the states what to do or what not to do? Or are we just going to do Donald Trump a solid? What are we going to do? Here's what I hope they do. Here's what I think they should do, Dean. I think they should be able to interpret the word insurrection in Section 3 of the 14th Amendment and say, this is what we think it means. They can probably even say, this is what we believe the procedures are that are necessary to qualify or disqualify the president. And they're going to, this whole thing about the office of the presidency not being an office is nonsense. I think they'll reject that. But then you know what they should do, Dean? After they set that guidance, they should turn it back to the states and say, you all are the ones who have to implement the guidance we have just delivered in our opinion. And now you will disqualify him or not in accordance with our guidance. That's what I believe they should do if they care about states' rights. What they will do is anybody's guess.
And last question here to follow up with that. What about the fact that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is for, in this case, federal office? And I don't mean the administration of the elections. I agree with that. But ultimately, it says that if you engage in insurrection, you are banned from, quote, any office. Wouldn't that be the determination for the Supreme Court, even after Trump won? Say he won, and then an application was made to the court, and they go, okay, we're interpreting the Constitution for a federal office of president, and he can't be sworn in.
Yeah, that is a viable end result, or a possible end result. Think about what Michigan did. Michigan said, listen, under the laws of our state, we are not allowed to ban somebody from the Republican primary ballot if the Republican Party of Michigan offers up that person's name. That person could be 15 years old, couldn't serve in the office of the presidency because you got to be 35. That person could have been president twice before, or that person could be an insurrectionist, as Donald Trump is. In Michigan, they say, listen, we're following our state law. We can't prohibit that person from being on the Republican primary ballot. I think at the end of the day, as you suggest, if everything goes haywire and Donald Trump ends up being elected, there can, and I think still will be, challenges to whether he's constitutionally disqualified. A third grader could read Section 3 of the 14th Amendment and reach that conclusion, one way or another. He can't serve in any office, state or federal.
It would be like a 20-year-old winning the election because the states didn't disqualify the person, and then a challenge brought before Trump is sworn in on January 20th that the constitutional language is plain that you have to be 35, and then the Supreme Court would have to engage. Well, Glenn, thank you, my friend, for spending so much time with us. The YouTube channel, Justice Matters with Glenn Kirschner, that's the best place. And you're still on X and Threads now, I see you as well.
I am Threads and the former Twitter, and we're always over on Patreon. Who wants to support our all volunteer efforts? Come on over to patreon.com. But if you choose not to, I'm on all the other platforms. You can find me pretty much anywhere.
Support our friend Glenn Kirschner. Well, Glenn, Happy New Year again. Thanks so much for being on. I look forward to chat. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Dean.